I got a request for a video with some fractions in it, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on this one. We have two equations. We're going to solve the system, and we have some fractions stuck in there. Now this is just a system that I made up on the fly. I don't know what the answer is yet. I don't know how complicated this is going to be, but we're going to work through it together. Now what I recommend is if this is something that you want to try yourself, that you pause the video at this time, get as far as you possibly can, and then go ahead and start playing the video and see if we decide to do the same thing. Looking at both of these equations, I'm kind of thinking for me it might be easier to cancel out the x, just because if I multiply this 1/2 by 2, that would equal 1. Now this would be a little more difficult to find some common ground unless I got rid of the fractions altogether, and that's actually some extra steps. So what I'll do here, like I said, I'll take this and I'll go ahead and multiply the whole thing by 2. And don't forget you're distributing when you do that. So 2 times 1/2 x is going to be 1x, or just x, minus 8y, don't forget we're distributing, equals 6. So then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the second equation next to it. That does make it a little bit easier, at least in my opinion. And there's really nothing we can do now at this point, because if you'll notice, these are not going to cancel out if you just add them up. You're going to have to change one of the signs. Doesn't matter which one. So I'll go ahead and change the top while I'm at it, and I'll show a color change in here so you can see that as well. I'll change the top one. When you multiply by one equation or by one term, you have to multiply each and every term on both sides. So if I change the sign here, I change the sign here, and I change the sign here. That's the equivalent of multiplying everything by -1. So what I'll do at this point is I'm going to add those two equations up. When I add those equations up, the x's cancel out because -x plus x is 0. We have 8y minus 1/3 y, and that's Callie coming up over here, so I'm having a difficult time writing, so please excuse the handwriting here. I'm sure you can hear her bell. What we need to do now is combine our like terms, so we add these up. I know that 8 minus 1/3 is going to be 7 2/3, but I need to figure out what that is as an improper fraction because that makes it easier. So if I change this 8 to a number over 3, 8 times 3 is 24. So I just stuck a little 24 over 3 here because that's the same thing as 8. So 24 over 3 minus 1/3 is going to be 23 over 3y. We combine our like terms on the other side as well. That gives me -4. In order to get that y by itself, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So times 2 over 23 times 2 over 23. So then we get y by itself. Y equals -8 over 23. That does not simplify. That does not cancel out. So it's okay to have a fraction, like I said before. We're going to have kind of a messy problem, it looks like, because I made up the original problem just on the fly. So we're going to take this y value, just like we do with every other problem, and we're going to plug it back into one of the originals, or you can plug it back into the revised version here, but it really depends on the person, like we talked about in class. So after looking at this, I think I'm going to keep the fractions together, and I'm going to plug this number in for this y, so the fractions kind of stay together to kind of make things easier. At least I think this is easier. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a slightly different color here. I'll take this equation. We have x plus 1/3 y equals 2. My y value that I found is -8 over 23. Once I multiply those numbers together, I get x plus -8 over, and I do believe on the top of my head that is 69, equals 2. And you don't even have to have the plus minus. That's the same thing as just subtracting, but it turns out that was just easier for me to write. Like I said, and like I've said before, it really doesn't matter. So we add 8 over 69 to both sides because the goal is to get x by itself. And you'll see that we don't have a common denominator between these two. So we need to find a common denominator. I know these will cancel out. I want to change it so it has a denominator of 69, so they have the same denominators. So you figure out what the top is going to be by multiplying 69 times 2. And I do believe 69 times 2 is 198. Yes, that is correct. So the 2 equals 198 over 69. So when I get my x by itself, I just add the numerators. And I get 206 over 69. This fraction cannot be simplified, so we end up with our final answer. Our final answer is going to be always x comma y. It's going to be 206 over 69, negative 8, 23. So the only thing different about this problem is we started off with some fractions, and it did turn pretty ugly. We did have some pretty strange looking fractions here, not something that we typically work with. But we did still have the same procedure. And I'm going to spend the rest of this video recapping the general procedure, not even concentrating on the fractions. I'm just looking at the number. And what you can do while I explain this is you can look at another example that we've done in the past or that you already have completed in your notes without fractions, and you can compare this with that problem and realize that it is the same thing, except the only difference here is you need to find common denominators when you solve the equations. So here's the recap. I'm not even going to concern with the fractions. Here I have two equations. I want to cancel out a variable. I felt it was easier to cancel out x, so I multiplied the whole top equation by 2. When I did that, in blue here, I ended up changing all the signs. That way when I added the x's up, they canceled out. So then I added all my like terms, I solved the equation, and I got my y value. Once you get your first value, you take it, you plug it in to another equation. It doesn't matter which one, I just chose the second one. You plug it in, you multiply, you add or subtract to both sides to get x by itself, and then we have our x value. Don't forget your final answer is always x comma y. Doesn't matter what your x and y are, it's always in alphabetical order, x comma y. So I hope this explanation and the fractions kind of helped you. Please go ahead and shoot me a message or an email on Edmodo if you have any other questions.